So in this presentation, I'm just going to download an object that I've prepared using Cinema 4D, and we'll integrate that object as a pickup object in our game scene. Now, in order to complete this part of the presentation, I would encourage you to use the coin model that I've provided inside the lesson folder in Blackboard. I'm just going to download this coin FBX model. So I've downloaded this to my download folder, it unzipped it for me, and I'll just drag that out to my desktop. So I have a copy of it on my desktop, and I'll jump back into Unity. Now, in order to incorporate this model into my project, there's just two things I'm going to do. The first thing is that I like to set up a dedicated folder for game assets. So I'm going to call this folder Models. So it implies that these are things that I've 3D modeled or models that I've downloaded. And I'll keep that organized into its own folder. Now I have this coin FBX folder on my desktop. I could just drag the entire folder into my models folder. In fact, I'll go into my models folder. I could take the entire coin FBX folder in. But what I'm really interested in is this coin.fbx file. FBX is just a universal 3D file format that we can use, that we can export and use inside Unity. And so I'll just drag this coin model into my models folder. Now when I do that, you'll see that it generates a couple of additional folders. And that's fine just the way that it is. I'm going to select the coin model and I'll just drag that out and I'll drop that directly into my scene. Now I'll lift it up a little bit so it's not touching the ground. But you can see here that there's this coin model. I just modeled this in Cinema 4D and I applied a texture to it. So this is basically just a cylinder that's laying on its side with a material applied to it. Now, right out of the box, any object that comes from a 3D modeling application does not have a collider on it, so I can walk right through it. Okay, so this does not have a trigger on it. It does not have a collider on it. So if I select the coin object, you can see in the hierarchy there's no collider on this object. There's no component here that lists a collider. So if I want to manually add the collider, there's two ways that I can do this. I could do this upon import, which means that I would need to go into my models folder and select the coin model, and I would choose this checkbox that says generate colliders on import and then hit apply. Now I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to manually apply the colliders to this object. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select the coin object. Just revert this back. I'm going to select the coin object inside the scene, inside my scene hierarchy, and with that object selected, I'm going to choose to go to Components, Physics, and I'll choose, in this case, a box collider. Okay, and the reason I chose a box collider is because it's the most simple collider there is, really, and that's one of the reasons I chose not to generate the colliders on import, because if I chose to select the model from the project folder, if I chose to generate colliders, it would actually use the three-dimensional mesh, which is made up of a lot more polygons, and it would generate a collider based on the polygon objects inside this model, which would actually be more information than I needed. I just need a simple box collider in this case, just to calculate whether or not I collide with this object. And so now when I hit play, I'll just run over, and now I bounce off the object, or I bounce into it. Okay? So again, I'll repeat that process one more time. I'm going to select my coin, Command Delete. So I've just selected the contents of the coin FBX folder, and I drag that into my models folder. Once that imported, I selected the coin model and just dragged that out into my scene. Once I have this inside the scene, I'm going to make sure that my coin is selected in the scene hierarchy, and I'll choose Components, Physics, Box Collider. Once I do that, I see the box collider pops up. I now have a box collider component here in my inspector, and at this point I'll check the is trigger, and at this point I can start to utilize this coin as a pickup object. I still need to build the basic mechanics here inside Playmaker, so I'll do that very quickly. I'm going to right click and add FSM. So again, I have the coin selected. I'm going to create an idle state, and the idle state is going to do a couple of different things. The first thing it's going to do is I'm going to tell it to rotate. So I'm going to go to the transform category. I'm going to choose rotate. and I'll double click, and I'm going to rotate along Y. And I'll rotate, let's say 90 degrees per second every frame, and I'll just give that a play and see how that looks. So again, I'm testing this frequently. Okay, and that's just about what I want. In addition to that, I'm going to add a trigger event. So I'm going to go find the physics component. I'm going to go find trigger event. And now if I don't want to dig through these menus or I forget where something is, what I can do is in the search field of the actions browser is I'll just type in trigger. And it filters out and finds all of everything that includes trigger as far as actions go. So I'll find that trigger event and I'll double click. And on trigger enter, I'm colliding with not an untagged object, but my player object. So I'm going to go back to my coin. I'll select idle. This trigger event, I want to collide with player. Now I just jumped out. I selected my first person controller to confirm that I had my tag set as player. I'll go back into my coin object. So on trigger enter with player, I need to fire an event. The event, I'm going to create this event. I'll just simply call it pickup. I'll add that pickup event as a transition from the idle state, and I'll wire that transition over to state 1. So at this point, if I go back into my idle state, there's a few things that could go wrong here. Currently, I do not have my send event listed. So if I'm troubleshooting this and I'm debugging this, if I walk across my coin, you'll see that my state machine is not firing. Okay, and that's because I forgot to include my send event here. So I'll choose that as pickup. So the logic here is that we're rotating, and while we're rotating, we're also waiting for a trigger event. And once we get an on trigger enter with the player, with an object tagged with player, we're going to fire off the pickup event. The pickup event is wired to state 1. So at this point I should be able to test this and it should work. It should fire over to state 1. There it goes. Okay, in this case, which causes the coin to stop. Now, that's the basic concept for wiring the pickup. Now, in the next presentation, we'll destroy this game object, and in addition to destroying it, we'll contribute to a value of health. In fact, I'll just set up the destroy game object on this for now, and I can find that inside game object. I'll find destroy self, and so now at this point with the destroy self command, as soon as I walk across that coin, it's no longer there, implying that we've picked it up. In the next presentation, we'll talk about wiring this to some kind of a points value or a health value, and we'll contribute to that value as we pick up multiple coins. But we'll do that in the next presentation.